What's up, Scampers? Welcome back to another video. This video is going to go over how to maintain the lead acid battery that comes on the Scamp trailer. I really didn't have time to go over the battery very much in my last video when I covered the entire electrical system. So there's a few things I want to say about the battery that I didn't get to last time, and there might even be a correction from the last video, so stay tuned at the end for that. My trailer has a conventional wet cell battery that came directly from the Scamp factory. It's located up here on the tongue behind the propane in this box. And it looks like this. These lead acid batteries have water levels inside of them that need to be maintained, so that's what we're going to check and go over today. I do want to mention that AGM batteries can look a lot like lead acid batteries, and they don't need their water fluid levels maintained. So if you aren't sure what kind of battery your trailer has, if the top of your battery is flat and there aren't any ports to open, it's likely AGM. But if you want to be 100% certain, you can pick up the battery and give it a little shake. If you feel fluid sloshing around in there, then you have a conventional wet lead acid battery. So I recommend checking the battery fluid levels at least once a month. But if you're like me and you have a permanently mounted solar system, or if you leave your RV plugged in all the time, your battery is going to constantly be charging, which will kind of use up the water faster. So I would check the fluid levels bi-monthly. Some people even recommend that you check your battery water level after each trip, which is something I'll probably start doing as my battery gets older and starts to age. Things you're going to need for this project are some distilled water. Definitely make sure you're not using tap water. Tap water has minerals in it that can coat the battery plates, and that'll cause the battery to work harder and become hotter, which will actually make the battery wear out faster. So just make sure that you're using distilled water for this. Other items you're going to need are a flathead screwdriver or a crescent wrench. You're going to need a rag. You want to wear some kind of gloves to protect your hands, and eye protection because you're working with battery acid, so just make sure you cover your hands and your eyes. You're going to need a light source of some kind, like a headlamp or a flashlight, because you're going to be looking inside your battery. And if your trailer doesn't have a battery gauge on it, you're going to need a multimeter to test your battery levels. And if you're wondering why we're doing this, if the distilled water inside the battery drops below the battery plates, that battery is not going to last much longer. It's not going to charge as quickly or as high, and the battery performance is really going to suffer. So this is something you want to keep an eye on just to maintain the health of your battery. Let's get started. The very first step in this process is to make sure that your battery is fully charged. When the battery charges, the fluid mixture inside of it expands. So if your battery isn't fully charged and you top it off and then charge it, it can cause that fluid to overflow. It could damage the battery and it could potentially cause injury. So step number one is to get your battery fully charged. So my trailer has a permanently mounted solar system, so it's always on and charging when the sun is up. So my battery is pretty much always topped off. But if it wasn't, I could use my adapter that I talked about in my last video to plug my 30 amp in to the 15 amp connection right here at home. So however you can, get your battery fully charged. The next step is to remove the battery from the trailer itself. But before I do that, I want to stop any input that's going into the battery. So if I have the trailer plugged in, I would unplug it and hit the kill switch inside the trailer. But I have this permanently mounted solar panel that bypasses that kill switch, so it's always adding a charge to the battery. So for me, the next step is to cover up my solar panel and just interrupt any kind of charge that's coming into the battery. Now it's safe for me to remove my battery from the trailer. But before you disconnect everything, it's a good idea to take a picture of how everything is connected. So in case you get confused when you go to reinstall it, you've got a little diagram to copy and it makes it a whole lot easier. If you found this video after you've already taken yours out and you're struggling to get your battery put back in, I'll add the photo I took of my battery up on the screen. But just understand that I have a couple extra wires from my solar setup. So this cable right here, it goes for the positive and the negative. You won't have that in yours because that's for my solar system. I'm just going to use a socket wrench to disconnect this, and you always want to connect the negative terminal before the positive terminal. Make sure you hold on to these. I'm just going to get my wires out of the way so I can pull this battery out without any interference. Now I can lift my battery out of the battery box. And this would be a good time just to look over the box and check it for any cracks, any kind of wear and tear, anything you might need to address. If you can see down here, one of my bolts has started to rust, so that's something I definitely want to address before I put my battery back in there. So we'll get to that later, but let's fill this battery up. I've got my battery out, so this is the point where I want to put on my safety gear. I want to protect my eyes and my hands because, again, there's battery acid inside here, and you never want to take any chances with burns. Next, I would just take this opportunity to clean off any dirt and debris that's on the battery. They live outside on the trailer, so any chance you can to clean it up is never a bad idea. Now that my battery is looking so fresh and so clean, it's time to pop off these two caps right here. So this is where you want to use your crescent wrench or your flathead screwdriver. I'm going to try the flathead screwdriver because I feel like that'll work better, but I guess either one will work, and you just want to do it carefully, understanding that the battery acid is right inside here. Cap number 1. Cap number 2. What you're going to see underneath here are these 6 holes, 3 under each cap, and these are 6 independent chambers. These all need water, so don't pour into this one and expect it to fill up all the other ones. You have to do them all individually. Now I can use my super bright headlamp to look inside these holes and see where the water levels are on my battery. So I'm going to check each one individually, and the water levels don't actually look that bad. I'm going to try my best to show it to you. These are a little hard to film inside of. Right there you can see the water level, and if I can get it to focus. Ideally, you want your water just 3/4 of an inch below these plastic tabs that are inside each hole. That leaves a little bit of room for the fluid to expand, and then an air gap at the top, which is what you want. So I'll try to get a better shot down inside here, but these little plastic tabs are where you want to fill the water to. You want the level to just touch just below the plastic tabs inside each of these reservoirs. This is incredibly hard to get on camera, but those little plastic tabs inside there, you want to fill the water level just up to those plastic tabs, leaving a 3/4 inch gap at the top. Now that I know my chambers could each use a little bit of water, I'm just going to use the funnel, and again, make sure you're using distilled water for this, but it should just take a splash. You don't want to overdo it. I can pour just a little bit in there. Use my light to see. That looks pretty good. Move on to the next one. Pour a little splash in there. Take a look. Perfect. Next one. Take a look. That one could use a splash more. Looks great. I just want to make sure that I don't overdo it. I don't want to have to try to get any of this back out. A little bit more on that one. Looks great. Fabulous. Awesome. I'll try my best to demonstrate the water levels for you now. If you can see that plastic tab right there, and the water's just up against it on all 6 chambers. I know it's pretty hard to see, I apologize. It gives you a good idea of the proper fill level. As you can see, it didn't take that much distilled water, but it definitely needed some. So the idea is putting the water at that level will completely cover the lead in the battery, but you leave you that little air gap at the top, which is exactly what you want. So now I can go ahead and put my caps back on. You want to just make sure you push them all the way in until they snap tight. Now my battery is ready to go. So if you didn't discover that you had a rusty bolt like I did, this is where you would reinstall your battery, but I'm going to take care of that bolt first. Let's go do it. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this, but I'm going to use this wire brush and a lemon. Use the acid to help get rid of the rust on that little bolt down there. I don't like to use chemicals when I don't have to, so I'm going to keep it simple. A little lemon juice on there. I'm going to let that sit for a little bit and really soak into the rust. Let the acid do its thing. I can already see the acid from the lemon juice eating away at that rust. It's working. Now I'm just going to take my wire brush and give it a little scrub. Voila! Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Now it's time to drop the battery back in. I have made a mental note that the negative was on this side, and again we're going to do the negative terminals first. Before I tighten it all the way down, I'm going to do my positive and make sure I don't have any cables left over. Okay, all my terminals are connected. I don't have any extra wires I wasn't expecting. If I get confused, I can refer to that picture I took earlier and just make sure everything is correct, but it looks good, so I'm going to tighten down my nuts. Again, if you're seeing extra wires here, don't freak out. Just know that it's because I have a solar system. So I have extra wires running to my battery from my solar panel. Before I tuck away my wires and make this all nice and tidy, this is something I wanted to mention that I forgot to talk about in my Scamp electrical basics video. There is a 30 amp fuse at your battery. So if your battery system ever stops working and you checked all your fuses inside the trailer, there's also a 30 amp fuse out here on the battery itself. You would just untwist it here. Inside here, there's a fuse that looks like this. So something I forgot to mention in the last video, one more fuse to check if you're troubleshooting your electrical system. Before I cover everything up, I just want to turn on my battery switch and just make sure that everything's working the way it should. My lights click back on and my battery gauge looks good. So everything's reinstalled correctly. I have officially maintained my battery for at least the next month. And an important thing to know about this process is after you're done refilling the water in your battery and reinstalling it, you want to make sure that you go ahead and charge that battery all the way up. You want to give that new water a chance to take a charge. So if you were doing this in the winter, you just want to make sure that you charge that battery after you fill it up with water and before you store it away. There should be enough room inside your battery box to tuck your wires in and make it look all pretty. But I mentioned before this might end up being a corrections video. So before I put the top back on my battery, there's something I need to check. Let's talk about it. All right, so if you watched my last video on the Scamp electrical system, you'll know that I said something that may or may not be correct. I had mentioned that you had to have the battery switch turned on to charge your trailer. And I should have thought about that more before I put that in the video because from what I know about most trailers, the battery charging system through your power cord that plugs in or through your solar system or through your tow vehicle is usually outside of that cutoff switch. But when I first got my Scamp, I plugged my trailer in and I noticed it wasn't getting a charge. So I looked into it, and some people in the forums online had said that, oh, the battery switch needs to be turned on. And I didn't have a multimeter at the time to verify that. So I kind of just took their word for it. But I had a viewer reach out to me in probably the most respectful way possible. And I really appreciate that. You know who you are. You keep it classy. You're awesome. But they had mentioned that their trailer doesn't have to have the battery switch engaged to get a charge. So now that I do have a multimeter, I can test that. There's a possibility that when I had plugged in and I wasn't getting a charge, there was maybe a problem with the outlet, or maybe my cable wasn't hooked up completely. There could be a host of things that was causing the trailer not to charge. So the only way to know for sure is to use a multimeter and to test it. So technically I have a Southwire clamp meter, which is awesome because it does AC and DC. And if you watch my last video, you know the difference now. But I'm gonna plug in my trailer, disengage my solar panel, disengage my battery switch, and see if the battery is getting a charge. And really, without a multimeter of some kind, there's no way to know for sure. So let's find out. All right, so right now I still have my solar panel plugged in just for the sake of continuity. I want to check it out when it's getting a charge through the solar panel. So I'm going to start with that one. And if you're interested in learning how to use a clamp meter like this, I can do a full tutorial on this. Just let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. But I'm going to check the battery right now while it's getting a charge from the solar panel, just to kind of get a baseline. I'll set this right here where you can see it, hopefully. And I'm going to touch both of these guys here. And that says 14.2, which is pretty standard what I get through my solar panel. So let's go disconnect everything, plug the trailer into my outlet, and see what I get. Okay, so now I've disconnected my solar panel. My battery is still on, but it's not getting any input from anywhere. Disconnected the solar panel. I'm not plugged in via the cord. Let's test the battery and see what I get. 12.5-ish. That's pretty standard for a full charge battery. So let's plug it in and kill the battery switch inside and see if it goes back up into the 13 range. That way we'll know the battery's getting a charge even when the battery cutoff switch is disengaged. The trailer is plugged in. I'm going to turn the main battery cutoff switch off. And now if we go back to the battery and we're still getting over 13 something for a charge, we know that I misspoke in my last video. Moment of truth. We're back at the battery. Let's see what it says. 13.6. That viewer was absolutely correct. I misspoke in my last video. That's the power of having the right tool for the job. Without some kind of voltage meter, you're just guessing. I stand corrected. So big thank you and shout out to my viewer who pointed that out to me so respectfully. You do not need to have your battery cutoff switch in the on position to charge your battery. From now on, if I have anything that I need to correct, I'll put it in the top comment and pin it in the comment section. So you can always check the comment section for any corrections that I come across, because I'm human and I'm also learning all the time. So I may not 100% be accurate all the time. So thank you for being so gracious with me. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this one, check out some others while you're here, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy scamping.